مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعلني إنك وجيها بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة. يا أبا عبد الله إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بموالاتك وبالبراءة ممن أسس أساس ظالمك وبنى عليه بنيانه وجرى في ظلمه وجره عليكم وعلى أشيائكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم وأتقرب إلى الله ثم إليكم بموالاتكم وموالاة وليكم وبالبراءة من أعدائكم والناصبين لكم الحرب وبالبراءة من أشيائهم وأتباعهم. إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم وولي لمن والاكم وعدو لمن عاداكم. فأسأل الله الذي أكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقني البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة وأن يثبت لي عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة. وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله وأن يرزقني طلب آثاركم مع إمام هدى ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم. وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشأن الذي لكم عنده أن يعطيني بمصابي بكم أفضل ما يعطي مصابا بمصيبته مصيبة ما أعظمها وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إنا هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن عاكلة الأكبر اللعين ابن اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله في كل موطن وموقف وموقف بنبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم أن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية عليهم منك اللعنة الأبدية العابدين. وهذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه. اللهم فباعث عليهم اللعن منك والعذاب الأليم. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليه وعليهم السلام. اللهم الآن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تاب إنه على ذلك. اللهم لعن الإصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم خص أنت أول ظالم بالعلم وابدأ به أولا ثم الثانية والثالث والرابع. اللهم لعن يزيد خامسا ولعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجانة وعمر بن سعد والشمرة وآل أبي سفيان وآل زياد وآل مروان إلى يوم القيامة. اللهم لك الحمد حمد الشاكرين لك على مسابح. الحمد لله على عظيم رزيتي. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم القيامة. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم القيامة وثبت لي قدر الصدق عندك مع الحسين وأصحاب الحسين الذين يكتبوا منهجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام.
صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Inshallah, before we continue, just a couple of announcements. There is a children's program going on downstairs. And so if we can ensure that our children are either next to us in the lecture hall or they're in the children's program downstairs. The second announcement for parents with toddlers 2-3 years old, we do have the toddler room in the classrooms and the fan is on and the air conditioning is being put in, inshallah. So let's make sure our toddlers are, you can watch the program there on the TV in that room as well. So the live stream of the lecture is going on. Inshallah, that way we can ensure that everybody is able to benefit from the program. Also, one of the brothers left their ring in the bathroom. If you left your ring in the bathroom, please make sure that you retrieve it, inshallah. Inshallah, for all the marhum mu'mineen and mu'minat, the ulama, the shuhada, those who are no longer among us, let us remember them with the Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Inshallah, without any further ado, we'll begin with the lecture. Please welcome our respected guest scholar, Sheikh Jafar, with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. Yeah. Or just a little bit toward you. Yeah. Just a little bit. Okay. Again, for the hastened reappearance of Muhammad Zaman, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. به نستعين. الحمد لله الذي جعل الحمد مفتاحا لذكري وسببا للمزيد من فضله ودليلا على آلائه وعظمته. ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين، أرواحنا له فداء. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد أرسلنا رسلا من قبلك وجعلنا لهم أزواجا وذرية وما كان لرسول أن يأتي بآية إلا بإذن الله، لكل أجل كتاب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Jameel Mu'mineen wa Mu'minat. First and foremost, I give my condolences to the Imam of our time, Imam Hujjah Jafar al-Sharif, and then to all of you on the occasion which we are commemorating in these days and nights, the shahadat of Imam Hussein, his al-Bayt, and his companions, alayhim afdal salatu wassalam. As we begin our lectures, focusing on verse 38 of Surah Al-Ra'd, so chapter 13, verse 38. We mentioned in the very beginning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
he points out to us in this verse the importance of family. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's telling Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that we sent before you other messengers, and we created or appointed or assigned for the other messengers, just as we've done with the Prophet Muhammad as well, with you, a family, wives, children, offspring. And so this is a natural part of our life and our existence. It's not something that is to be shunned or to be taken lightly, especially when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's presenting this to us, that this is what the prophets did. It's normal. But unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to these topics, or topics of marriage or building family, sometimes we don't give the best impression or the right impression to our youth. Quite often they may hear the negative side of, oh, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, or you don't do this. When we look at the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, or even in the example of his messengers, we find that for everything that we may tell our youth not to do, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the other end, he has given us the permissible way of doing this. And so when we discuss these matters of family, of marriage, with our youth, then we need to take that into consideration, that we give them, again, a balanced approach to this topic. And I'll give a few examples. So one of the examples, we say that, well, you know what, young man and young girl who are not married, they shouldn't be conversating with each other. They shouldn't talk to one another. This is something, especially if that conversation goes into talk about romance or these type of things, this is one of the things that's not allowed. But on the other side, we should, not only in our conversation with them, but even in our practice as parents in homes. What is the halal side of that? That as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he stated, and also we find this in the al-Bayt alayhim afsalatu, they often requires, they say, listen, that if you're married, if you're husband and wife, declare your affection for your spouse. One person came to Rasulullah, he says, what is the right of my wife? He says, tell her you love her. And he asks again, he says, tell her you love her. Third time, the Prophet said the exact same thing. So when it comes to, yes, the impermissible way, we make sure that that is understood, but on the other end, we shouldn't be in our homes, again, because the kids, they learn this. And it affects them, as I said, in their life beyond our house. That if you have a husband and wife who live together, they never tell each other that they love each other. You know, they may call each other, have a phone call, they end up, okay, assalamu alaikum, bye, that's it. But they don't end that conversation. It's like, okay, assalamu alaikum, I love you, and hang up. This is what is recommended by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have to give the proper perspective to our youth. Another thing, for example, is that yes, when we are raising our young daughters, yes, they shouldn't go out dressed in an inappropriate way. They should not go out, with makeup or these type of things on. Yeah, these are, read the books of the Maraja. But at home, yes, it is recommended that the spouses, that they look good and decent for one another. That yes, if the husband, he would like his wife to wear makeup, then yes, wear it in the house. But when she leaves the house, okay, she removes it. And this will have an effect. So your daughters will see that, oh, well, at home, my mother, has makeup, she's looking good for my father. But when it's time to leave the house, she removes these things. And she goes out not attracting attention to herself. But also on the side of the brothers as well, of course, you're maybe at home, doesn't mean that, okay, well, I'm at home, I'm lounging, and you just dress sloppy. No, your wife wants to see you looking decent too, dress decent. So this is one of the things that Islam, it recommends, and we have to do this. Another aspect is shaking hands, and this sometimes becomes a big thing in this society. That yes, we tell youth, hey, the opposite sex, don't shake each other's hands because this is not allowed. It's not allowed in our deen. But on the opposite side, what does Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what does he say? That when a husband and wife, when they hold hands, what happens? Their sins are forgiven. But do we teach this to our youth? Or are in our spaces at home, we don't show that affection to our spouses, and we're just kind of really, stiff and things like that, and we don't show this, that yes, this is what is recommended by Rasulullah. This is what's recommended by the Deen. And of course, it is not permitted to have illicit relationships out of wedlock. This is one of the biggest taboos. But at the same time, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala state? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَانْكِحُوا أَيَّامَكُمْ. And what does that mean? It says, marry your youth. Make effort. I've been in situations and sometimes, and I'll say this especially for the parents, because it's important. And perhaps sometimes, maybe because I grew up here, and sometimes some of the youth, they relate to me. And sometimes I've heard some of the youth, they say, yeah, Sheikh, really want to get married, and what is the way of doing this? How do we go about this in an appropriate way? And I recall talking to some of the parents. I'm like, oh, you know what? You probably should start thinking about getting your child married. And I've gotten this response. Oh no, they're not thinking about marriage now. They're too young. I'm like, subhanAllah. They were just speaking to me about marriage. And now you're not even, it's completely out of your mind because you're thinking that, oh, they're too young. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's saying in the Quran to Rasulullah, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلًا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ. We sent prophets, we made for them families. And so we have to understand how to truly guide our youth, especially in this society. Not everyone is dressed appropriate. Not everyone has the best of modesty. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَأَنْكِحُوا أَيَّامَ مِنْكُمْ. Make effort to make sure your youth are married, that you're protecting them. One of the, I would say, more successful marriages that was in my community in Austin. MashaAllah, the brother, he moved to another community now, unfortunately. It was lost for us in Austin. But again, very successful brother. When I spoke with him, we were talking, he got married young. And when he got married, him and his wife, they lived in their father's house. He was in college. His wife had just graduated from high school. She was going to college. They stayed there. They made a plan that, okay, well, we won't have children at the moment. He finished his college. After he finished his college, he began to work. He, then got his own house. Then they moved out from their parents' house. Very successful marriage. And just recently, and because that brother, he got married I think he was like 19. And just recently, he posted that now his son now is married at 19 as well. Again, he continues this tradition and this custom. And mashallah, and I would say mashallah, is I say it's a successful marriage and a successful household. Because the households, they're very religious. Very religious. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells us in the Quran, وَانْكِحُوا أَيَّامَكُمْ. Today we're making so many excuses. Oh, well, I don't have the degree. I didn't ask you to have the degree. Yeah, you may have to make a plan, make that proper plan, and move forward. It is possible. The other thing that sometimes we may not give that best impression sometimes to our youth when it comes to this idea of building a family. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he points to in Surah Al-Ahzab. In Surah Al-Ahzab, he says, yes, the women, they should be, our wives or women in public spaces, they should be very modest. She should be modest, should not speak very loud, and have that modesty. But what about at their home with their husbands? Abu Basir, one of the great students of Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, he stated that when a husband and wife interact, he says, yeah, that modesty and shyness that woman she displays in public space, he says, it shouldn't be with her husband when she's alone with her husband. He says, no, you put that modesty aside. And that is to develop that relationship of love and affection. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the word he uses in the Quran, that when that relationship between the husband and wife, that he created that for what? For mawadda wa rahmah, for love, mercy, affection. So, but if the husband is shy in front of his wife when they're alone, or the wife is shy, he says, oh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, he says, no, that is not the time for that. It's not the time for that. The other issue I wanted to point out today, that when we speak about this relationship between families, different aspects of it, and inshallah, if we have time, we'll go over multiple aspects. There's a relationship between the parents, and then there's a relationship between the children and the parents. When it comes to the relationship between the husband and wife, again, after you get to that point of deciding that you're going to establish a family, you're going to marry, we understand that marriage is a contract between a man and a woman. And that contract brings about certain rights, meaning that the husband will have certain rights, the wives will have certain rights. And this is one of the interesting things and very beautiful things about Islam and marriage. And what is that? That when we actually look at the rights, what are the rights of the husband and what is the rights of the wife? And I'm going to say this for experience. 90% of our community, or even 95% of our community, don't even know what those rights are. Subhanallah. And they're not difficult to remember. They're not difficult to understand either. There are only a few. And there's a wisdom and there's a philosophy behind that. Why are the rights only what I like to call, they're just bare bones. They're just a minimum, meaning that these rights, they create a threshold that don't fall below that threshold. But what you build and what you establish beyond that, then alhamdulillah. In fact, that is the objective, not just to simply suffice with that threshold. And I'll just mention a few of those. So the rights of the husband over the wife. I say, and before I mention this, and I do want to make this statement because it's important as well. Because when we don't understand these rights, we don't understand that these rights are also complementary to each other. Meaning that if one right is not being observed on one side, then that means on the other side, that, oh, well, you're not observing this right, then the wife doesn't have to observe that right. Or wife is not observing this right, then that right is not observed. Meaning that they are compatible. That if all the rights are being observed by one side, then all the rights should and must be observed also by the other side. But if there's not the rights being observed on one side, then that, based on the Sharia, gives a leeway that, well, hey, you're not doing this, so then, hey, I have a leeway in this regards. So the rights of the husband over the wife. And then this is one that I think sometimes is always mentioned, obedience. Wife has to obey. But that obedience is within the parameters. I'm not going to go into too much details. Read them, as I said. Read them. This is a good, maybe, homework assignment for the husband and wife. In fact, if you want to read the Risalat of al-Hukuk of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, alayhi salatu wasalam, sit down, husband and wife, read what are the rights of the husband, what are the rights of the wife. Very short. And then also within the istifta'at or the ahkam of the ulama, what are those rights? So one of them things that comes up, right of the husband or the wife, obedience. And that's within the parameters of the Sharia. Not that you're telling your wife to do something that's outside the folds of Sharia. No. But that means that obedience also is based on making sure that all those other rights are being observed, that the right that the wife has over the husband. And so that obedience is something which is a normalized. And I'll come to some bad examples later, but not in this lecture, where sometimes we think that, oh, hey, this is the obedience. No, that's not the obedience. Does she have to cook and she has to, oh, my wife has to cook? No, who said that? She has to obey me. That's not her responsibility. It's not her duty. And I know brothers sometimes they get a little uncomfortable when I speak that. I'm like, oh, what? When I come home from a hard days of work, she doesn't have to cook for me? Nope, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, she can charge you for cooking. Say, okay, I'll cook, but this is how much you have to pay me. The other right of the husband over the wife is what? Yeah, she has to please the husband. As we mentioned, look good for the husband, these things. Another right that he has that, yeah, she cannot leave the house without his permission. And that also is pending upon what? And there's a rationale behind it. Not in every circumstance that, oh, hey, and I'll give you one example just quickly, since we hear the majlis of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So if your wife wants to go out to a women's gathering, and that gathering is a religious gathering, remembrance of the al-Bayt, recitation of the Quran, within the riwayat of the al-Bayt, no, you don't stop your wife from going to that. But sometimes you say, oh, she has to obey me, she can't leave the house. Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu says, no, that gathering is something that is going to fortify her deen. You don't stop her from that. The other thing is that she should not spend the money of her husband in charity without his permission. When it comes to the wife's right over the husband, he has to pay the dowry, the mahr, the money that is given, the wedding gift to the wife. He has to pay what is considered to be alimony. This is not an alimony of divorce, but this is just a general name for food, clothing, and sheltering. And then he has to defend her honor, keep her safe. And that's one of the reasons why the permission of her going out of the house is on the husband, because he has to make sure, hey, if you're going out at this time of night, it's not safe. What are you doing? No, you can't go. Or, hey, if you're going to go out, then I will chaperone you. Or, hey, we have an elder son, he will chaperone you. And make sure that your wife, your family is safe. And as I said, these are bare bones. Let me give you one example, as I mentioned before. You know what? If you observe these bare bones, like I said, the wife is not obligated to cook. And if the husband's observing his rights, he says, you know what? I bring the food in the house, the food is there. Okay. I don't have to sit down and eat with you. I'll bring the food, it's there for you to make, and every day I'm going to go out and eat. Because you're not cooking for me, so I'll go eat outside, and wife is at home, she cooks her own food. What type of relationship are you building at that point? You're not building. Are you observing what is your obligation? Absolutely. What type of life is that? That's not that life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that he's created this institution of marriage, li mawadda wa rahma, for creating love, affection, mercy, kindness between the husband and wife. You want to establish that in that way. So these rights are bare minimum. And as I said, that a lot of us, we don't even know what those rights are, because quite often, whenever I get called in by some families that are having some issues, one of the things I often hear, sometimes from both sides, oh, my rights are not being observed. My rights are not being observed. And immediately I ask, oh, okay, well, what right is that you think is not being observed? Because I really want to see, if that right is not being observed, it has to be corrected. And one of those rights is that, oh, you know what, that right, my wife is not cooking for me. I'm like, bro, that's not right. She can actually charge you for that. Sometimes the women say, oh, you know what? He's not giving me X amount of money for a month. I'm like, okay, but is he taking care of these things? Yes. It's like, okay, well, he doesn't have to. But the thing to go beyond those rights, to show that kindness and love to your spouse, this is what's desired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is guiding us towards. To build beyond that. And if we only observe rights, as I said, you're not going to be happy. Building a family, as we understand from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal salatu wasalam, it mostly hinges upon what? Our akhlaq. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He didn't say, إِنَّمَا بَعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ الْحُقُوقِ. I was sent forth to make sure that everyone gets their rights. Yes, everyone should observe each other's rights. Yes, everyone should gain their rights. But beyond those rights, what is greater, he says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ. You guys know what? مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I came to complete ethics. Why? Because the rights and huquq are not complete without those ethics. Those rights that we want to gain from each other, that if we don't have the ethics and the adab and the akhlaq to put beside those things, then yeah, you're going to create a life of misery in your house. You're going to create a life of misery. And not only will you create it for yourselves as husband and wife, it's going to rub off on the kids as well. It's going to rub off on the kids. But if you create a household of affection and love, that yes, you know what? We're going to observe these rights. And in fact, even if one of us falls a little bit short of observing those rights through our akhlaq and through our manners, we'll help them to begin to observe that right. Because they see that, oh, well, although you're not doing it for me, but I'm constantly there for you. And then after a while, they think, oh, you know what? SubhanAllah, yes, I do need to do this. I help that my spouse to, again, be the best person that they can be. And we'll speak about that purpose and objective of marriage. How does it affect the children as well? Well, I'll give you just one simple example. This is, if we create that atmosphere of ethics and akhlaq, love and affection among ourselves, and helping each other to become the best we can be, it's going to rub off on the kids. One of the Abid or Rafa worshippers in Qom, he said that he recalls the interaction between his parents and how his father would wake his mother up. He says, it came a point that I started waking up myself before the Salat al-Fajr. He says, and I would hear my father, he would just wake his mother up. It was like, Pashu, get up. We'll have plenty of time to sleep in the grave. But now, let's get up. Even if a few minutes before the Salat. So he's concerned about the well-being, the spirituality of his wife. And what happens? It rubs off on his son. To the point that this individual, he's someone who makes the Salat al-Layl. Even Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that he would say, As-Salat, in Fajr, time of Fajr, As-Salat, ya Ahl Bayt al-Nabi. This is the Ahlul Bayt, this ma'soom. They're not missing their Salat. But he's concerned and he's waking them up. And this is out of love and affection for them. I want to give a very beautiful example of this love and affection, of how the Ahlul Bayt that they teach us. But we have to really pay attention to the life of the Ahlul Bayt. Rabab, mother of Sakina, the wife of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Her father is Imru Qais. Imru Qais, like in the time of the Jahiliyyah, he was one of the great poets. That even his poetry was hanging from the Kaaba, Imru Qais. And of course, he became Muslim. So Rabab is from a household, you could say cultured household, a household that she grew up hearing poetry. So Imam Hussein alayhi salatu, he writes a poem to Rabab and Sakina. It's a love poem, you could say, where he says, لَعَمْرُكَ إِنَّنِي لَأَحِبُّ دَارًا تَحِلُّ بِهَا سَكِينَةُ وَالرَّبَابُ. He says, I swear on my life, by your life, that I love that house, that Sakina and Rabab are in that house. أحبهما وأبذل جل مالي وليس بلائمي فيها عتاب ولست لهم وإن عتبوا مطيعا حياتي ويغيبني التراب. He says, I love them both. And Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, he's expressing his love and affection for Rabab and for Sakina. And of course, we know what Rabab, that at least one action after the Arba'in, when they went back, they said, Rabab, she didn't leave from the grave of Imam Hussein. That after they returned from Sham back to Karbala, she stayed at the grave of Imam Hussein. This is the love and the affection that the al-Bayt, they are teaching us to cultivate in our own families. If we were asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma ja'al mahyaya mahya Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, Allah, make my life like the life of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Are we writing poems? Or at least expressing our love? Maybe we're not poetic, but, and I'll just recommend this because sometimes we are not astute to this as well. Sometimes we have different love languages. Very interesting book. It's not a book written by a Muslim, but it's very interesting, the 5 love languages. That how each individual, they express their love. Some express it through gift giving, some express it through, touching or at least feeling or hugging, different ways. Some express it through poetry or language, different ways. And this is good for husband and wife to understand, what is the love language of my spouse? And so how do I communicate that affection and love to them? Right? Because Imam Hussein alayhi salatu Rasulullah, the al-Bayt alayhi salatu, they express it, and he said that we should express it. Rabab also, she wrote a poem for Imam Hussein. And I'll just give one line of that. And what does she say to Imam Hussein? قَدْ كُنْتَ لِي جَبَلًا صَعْبًا أَلُوذُ بِهِ وَكُنْتَ تَصْحَبُنَا بِالرَّحْمِ وَالِدَيْنِ. Allah. What does she say? She says to her Hussein, she says that you're like a strong mountain, jabalan sa'aba, like a firm mountain that I take pleasure in, aludhu bihi, that I love. And you were my companion, وَكُنْتَ تَصْحَبُنَا بِالرَّحْمِ وَالِدَيْنِ. And that your rahmah and your mercy and your kindness to us was like a kindness that a child receives from their parents. That type of love Imam Hussein he had for his family. And that type of love that Rabab, she had for Imam Hussein. That love and affection doesn't mean we're totally and solely concerned about their worldly life. Both their worldly life, but more importantly also their spiritual life, their connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the points that I'll maybe make this point tomorrow because of time. But the parents, when they show that love and they show that affection to one another, you're creating the best example for your children. You're creating that example that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he created. And many majlis you've already heard that how much did Rasulullah, he loved Fatima to Zahra sallallahu alaihi. You've heard that how much that Amir al-Mu'mineen, he loved Fatima to Zahra. How does that instill the values in our children? Instill values. It helps them not only when they begin to establish their own family, it helps them, again, within the community, that how they interact with others in the community. And trust me, it rubs off that what they see in the household is what they will reflect in the society as well, what they will reflect in the community, what they will reflect when they're out and about with others. If you create a solid identity, Muslim identity for them in the home, it's going to reflect when they come out in that society. It's going to reflect that. And just in the end, I want to give just one advice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also deals with this love and affection. The Prophet says, "Addibu awladukum ala thalath khisal." So train your children with three things and three characteristics. He says, "Hubbu nabiyyukum wa hubbi ahli baytihi wa ala qira'ati al-Quran." There's three things. He says, instill with him the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhi wa sallam. The love of Ahlul Bayt. Love of Rasulullah and the love of Ahlul Bayt. And of course, if you're instilling in them the love of Rasulullah and the love of Ahlul Bayt, that means what? That we're reflecting the actions of Rasulullah and Ahlul Bayt in our household. Doesn't mean to say, oh, you know what? How do you gain the love of Ahlul Bayt? Come to the majlis, mourn and weep for the Ahlul Bayt, celebrate their births. But then in our house, we create a house of Fir'aun. SubhanAllah. So where's the love of Ahlul Bayt? How do we cultivate that love of Ahlul Bayt? Only one factor of that is to bring them to the masjid. Only one factor of that is to let them hear that. What are the advice of Rasulullah? What is the advice of the Ahlul Bayt? How have they taught us the Quran? How have they implemented in their house? But if in our household, we're saying, hey, love the Ahlul Bayt when you're in the masjid, but when we're at home, you have to contend with the authority of Fir'aun. And not just the Fir'aun of men. The women can have that Fir'aun as well, that Pharaoh-ness. Oh, you're going to have to contend with me, the queen. No. You create that love and affection. Mahabba wa rahmah. Mawadda wa rahmah. And this is one of the things that we see in Karbala. This is one of the things that we see that, again, subhanAllah, if you look at all of the youth who go forth in Karbala, look at all of those youth who go forth. Whether they were from Bani Hashim or not. Again, one of the ones who were not from Bani Hashim, he's mentioned in the Maqtal as Shabun Qutila Abu. Was a youth who his father was martyred. But he was like, you know what? I want to be like my father. Even Imam Hussein alayhi hafizahullah, when he went to get permission, Imam Hussein says, no, your father has been martyred based on the ahkam. If we're looking at the rights, the hukuk, the jihad is now, you don't have to do that. But this interview says, no, I love the Ahlul Bayt. And I want to express that love by sacrificing as my father sacrifices. That individual became a martyr. His mother actually also became a martyr. SubhanAllah, the entire family was martyred in Karbala. And there are many individuals in Karbala that sometimes we may not know what happened, or how they were martyred. Many of the also of Bani Hashim, this night we are to recite the maqtal of Abdullah ibn Hassan. But it's interesting that Imam Hassan alayhi wasalam, he had two sons in Karbala that had that name, Abdullah. One of them, his actual name was Abu Bakr ibn Hassan. Abu Bakr, or that's at least what they called him, his kunya, his nickname, Abu Bakr ibn Hassan. But he was also known as Abdullah ibn Hassan. And he's mentioned in the Ziyarat al-Nahiya. The Ziyarat al-Nahiya, that's the ziyarat that Imam Zaman Jafar al-Sharif, that he recites for the Shuhada of Karbala. And there he mentions Abu Bakr ibn Hassan. He says, Assalamu ala Abi Bakr ibn Hassan ibn Ali al-Zaki al-Wali. That peace and salutations upon Abi Bakr ibn Hassan al-Marami bis-Sahim al-Radi, the one who was martyred by an arrow. La'anallahu qatilah. May Allah curse his killer, Abdullah ibn Uqbat al-Ghanawi. Abu Bakr, or Abdullah ibn Hassan, he was called Abdullah al-Akbar among the sons of Imam Hassan. The other Abdullah of Imam Hassan, that he was martyred after Imam Hussein alayhi wasalam took Aliyah Asghar towards the battlefield simply to request water. And Hurm al-La'in shot an arrow in his throat. At that point, Imam Hussein, he mounted upon his horse to go out onto the battlefield. This Abdullah al-Asghar, he was not just the nephew of Imam Hussein. This was like the son of Imam Hussein. He was the youngest son, younger than Qasim. They said that Abdullah, that when he was born after the shahadat of Imam Hassan, meaning that he never saw his father's face. He only saw the face of his uncle Hussein, who treated him like his own son. They said that when Imam Hussein, that when he went upon the plains of Karbala, and he fought to the point that he fell upon from the horse onto the plains of Karbala. They said that Abdullah ibn Hassan, that he saw that what was happening to his uncle. They said he could not contain himself, and he was going forth and running forth. Imam Hussein, he saw that Abdullah was coming, and he called out to his sister Zainab, Ya Zainab, that, oh Zainab, hold him back, don't let him come to this battlefield, that he shouldn't come out. This is the young son of Imam al-Hassan. They said that this young man, he could not be contained, so he ran out to his uncle. He ran out to Imam Hussein. As he ran out to Imam Hussein, there was one enemy, Bahir. He was coming with his sword drawn towards Imam Hussein. And as this young Abdullah, he came and he stood in front of his uncle. He called out to this individual, Ya bin al-Khabith, ataqtulu ammi al-Hussein. Oh son of a villain, will you kill my uncle Hussein? Will you kill him? فَضَرَبَهُ بَحْرَ بِالسَّيْفِ. But then Bahr, he continued and he sliced down and he struck Abdullah. When he struck Abdullah, Abdullah called out, Ya oh my uncle. But what could Imam Hussein do for him? Imam Hussein's body was full of spears and arrows. So Imam Hussein, ضَمَّهُ إِلَى صَدْرِي, Imam Hussein just drew him near to his chest. He says, Ya ibn akhi, isbir ala ma nazala bik. Oh my son, oh my son, oh my nephew, be patient of what has happened to you. But what happened to Abdullah? They said that when that enemy, when he's cut down upon Abdullah, he cut the arm of Abdullah. According to the Maqtal, there were a few people who lost their hands in Karbala. One of them was this Abdullah. The other one was Wahab. His hand was also severed. But then there was one that we will come to later, that he lost both of his arms by the Euphrates. What happened to Abdullah? Not only was his arm cut off, just like his nephew, just like his cousin Ali Asghar, he was shot with an arrow by Harumala. And this is what Imam Zaman, when he gives his salutations upon Abdullah, the son of Hassan in the Ziyarat Nahiya, he says, As-salamu ala Abdullah ibn Hassan ibn Ali az-Zaki. Peace and salutations upon Abdullah, the son of Hassan ibn Ali, the pure one. لعن الله قاتلا, that may Allah curse the one who killed him. It wasn't his arm that was sliced that killed him, but how was Abdullah killed? لعن الله قاتلا وراميه حرملة بن كاهن الأسدي. Imam al-Zaman, he curses Harmala for shooting the arrow into the chest of Abdullah, marring him in the arms of Imam Hussein. إن لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. اللهم بحق هذا المجلس لعبد الله بن الحسن اغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا واقضي حوائجنا واشف مرضانا وارحم امواتنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان، واجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره والمستشفرين بين يديه وتحت لوائه بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. مات الحسين.
يا حسين 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 يا حسين
Zain, 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 Beloved, Zain, 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 Beloved, alone in my tent I stand. Where is my father, Hussein Adiman? Was I scream? I am the son, Zain al-Abidin. Stood, 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 all by myself, stood, 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 with no one else, Zain, 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 Beloved, Zain, 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 Beloved. me instant zin, zin, zin. Zin, 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 then he died in precision, but short with determination. He had to bring salvation. He had to be the exploration. Sham, 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 and all the pain. Sham, 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 leaving the same. Zen, 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 Allah, zen, 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 Allah,
Ya Hasan, Ya Hussein, Mawla Haq Imam, Ya Hasan, Mawla Haq Imam, Ya Hussein, Mawla Haq Imam, Ya Hasan, Ya Hussein, Mawla Haq Imam, Ya Hussein, Mawla Haq Imam, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, वो आबिदे बीमार था, वो आबिदे बीमार था, चलने से जो लाचार था, चलने से जो लाचार था, और शाम का बाजार था, और मुस्तफा की बेटी या मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, शबीर की गोलाडली, शबीर की गोलाडली, सीने पे जो शाह के पली, सीने पे जो शाह के पली, किसकी अबावन में जली, मुँह पे तमाचों के निशा, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, प्यासे गले खंजर चले, प्यासे गले खंजर चले, चादर छिनी दूर लगे, चादर छिनी दूर लगे, आपस के परचम तले रोकर कहे हे बीबिया, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, रोकर कहे कासिम की माँ, रोकर कहे कासिम की माँ, मारा गया कासिम जफार, मारा गया कासिम जफार, ऐलान में जूझू तहाँ, मेरी तेरी सहरा तेरा, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, वो असगरे बेशीर था, वो असगरे बेशीर था, और हुर्मला का तीर था, और हुर्मला का तीर था, प्यासा गला क्यों करता, गर्ज़ी ज़मीन और आसमां, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, शाम गरीब आ गई, शाम गरीब आ गई, आबिद को गैरत का गई, आबिद को गैरत का गई, गैरत से लग आ गई, आपस और अकबर कहा, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या हुसैन, मौला हक इमाम या हसन या
Tennessee
حسين 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 يا قصة عشق ما حد عرف معناها، من حرك يدمع طول الزمن نقراها، رايتك فوق العرش رب السما حلاها، جينا نكتب لك عهد كربلاء ما ننساها، جينا نكتب لك عهد كربلاء ما ننساها. حسين حسين يا رسول التضحية صار محل عراجك، من عطش حصن الشرع رويت من أمجاجك، صار تاج الدين لك وانت سلب تاجك، يا بحر كل قلب تلاطمت أمواجك، يا بحر كل قلب تلاطمت أمواجك. حسين حسين هذا عاشورك يبل صورة حزن مرسومة، كل محرم يعتني صوت المحب همومه، يا محمد يا علي يا فاطمة المظلومة، يا محمد يا علي يا فاطمة المظلومة، حسين ما ننسى أبدا والنحر والدمومة، حسين ما ننسى أبدا والنحر والدمومة. حسين حسين فعلى رايكم بنكسر لو دمعنا نسيلك، جينا ينضع العلم من الزمن تشكيلك، سمعنا سبح الأمطار بجودي هدم حيلك، يقول زينب من رفعتم هالعلم هالليلة، يقول زينب من رفعتم هالعلم هالليلة. حسين حسين هذا عاشورك يظل صورة حزن مرسومة، كل محرم يعتني صوت المحب همومة، يا محمد يا علي يا فاطمة المظلومة، يا محمد يا علي يا فاطمة المظلومة، حسين ما ننسى أبدا والنحر والدمومة، حسين ما ننسى أبدا والنحر والدمومة. حسين فعلى راية قبرتك سودة ودمعنا نشيله جينا يمرع العلم دم الزمن تشكيله سمعنا سبع القنطرات الجوتي هدم حيله يقول زينب من رفع هالعلم هالليله يقول زينب من رفع هالعلم هالليله حسينان 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 حسين حسينان حسينان حسين حسينان 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 حسين حسينان 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 حسين بيننا بالحزن شهر المصايب رجانا منك كل مدد خذنا يا مولانا احنا ما ناسيك بد ندري ما تنسانا لو قرينا لك نعيد حضر الزهرة ويانا لو قرينا لك نعيد حضر الزهرة ويانا حسينان 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 حسين حسينان 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 حسين حسينان 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 حسين
असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आजा चांद मेरे तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। मेरे लाडले कहाँ हो, मेरे लाडले कहाँ हो, सीने तुम्हें लगाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चाँद मेरे तेरी प्यास में बुझा दूं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चाँद मेरे तेरी प्यास में बुझा दूं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। बेटा तुम्हारा कातिल मेरे सामने खड़ा है, जाने क्यों हंस रहा है, चादर भी लुट चुकी है, मुँह किस तरह छुपा दूं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ, चाँद मेरे तेरी प्यास में बुझा दूं, तेरे छूने को सकीना रो रो के छूती है, तुझे घर में ढूंढती है, तेरी मौत की खबर में कैसे उसे सुनाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चाँद मेरे तेरी प्यास में बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। मेरी जान जा रही है ये सोच सोच असगर, इस धूप से गले पर ये तीर कैसे खेला, बहनों क्या क्या बताऊं,
तेरी प्यास में बुझा लूं, जब रात होगी हमने हो जाएगा अंधेरा, डरना नहीं है बेटा, दादी कहेगी तुमसे, आ मैं तुझे सुलाऊं, आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास में बुझाऊं, तुम रात को हमेशा सुनते थे माँ से गोरी, अपनी आदि होगी फिर तो तुम्हें निभा कर नादे अली सुनाऊं, आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास में बुझाऊं, अरे आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास में बुझा लूं, असगर में तेरी मौत, या हुसैन, या हुसैन, میدوم بینم او علی اکبر ای کریم پرخون از جفا دارد میدوم بینم او علی اکبر ای کریم پرخون از جفا دارد این دل تنگم مقتبا دارد دنیا میل کربلا دارد
عمو سپاه حسن میرسد به یاری تو. من آمدم که حسن را نشان بدهم. عمو شوقی گودال بیش از اندازه است. خدا کند بتوانم نجاتتان بدهم. سپروران تو با سینه میشوم حیات. اگر به نیزه و شمشیرها امان بدهم. مگر که زنده نباشم که در دل گودال اجازه زدنت را به کوفیان بدهم. من آمدم که شوم حائل تو شوم حائل تو امنه. مباد فرصت دیگر جان بدهم. صدای مرکب و نعل جدید می آید. صدای مرکب و نعل جدید می آید. عمو چگونه خبر را به استخوان بدهم. فقط نصیب من و شیر خاره شد این فخر که روی سینه مولای خویش جان بدهم. عزیز فاطمه انگشتر تو را ای کاش بگیرم و خود آن را به صاحبان بدهم. برای آن که جسارت به پیکرم نشود خودم لباس تنت را به اینان بدهم. یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا اللهم اجر وليك الفرج والعافية والنصر. اللهم ادرك بنا رياضه واشهدنا اياما واجعلنا من خير اعوانه وانصاره. اللهم انصر من نصر الدين واخذل من خذل المسلمين. اللهم اشغل الظالمين عن الظالمين. اللهم ارزقنا شهادة في سبيلك. اللهم كن بوليك الحجة الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آله في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا علينا حتى تسكنه بلدة التقوى وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا ارحم الراحمين. Thinking of all of those who are in need of our du'as, our brothers and sisters, especially in the areas where there's fighting, where there's war in Palestine, in Yemen, in Lebanon, and all of the difficulties around the Muslim world, in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Iraq, in Pakistan. Let us all raise our hands together, praying for the Ummah, praying for the followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the lovers of Abadullah Hussein, inshallah, with 5 times Amin Majid. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mustarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibu al-mustarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma على محمد وآله صلوات.